Hey, everybody. We are very excited to be talking about how you can live on the edge safely and how we can achieve end-to-end type safety when we're working with edge functions and serverless in general. A little bit about us. My name is Mo. I am head of mobile at Theodo UK. Theodo is a digital consultancy here in London. I actually built my first mobile app when I was 13. It was an app that would prompt you to do something good, maybe take some flowers to a care home. And after you did that, you would click, I've done my good deed, and it would give you a counter. It surprisingly passed the App Store review and actually was on the App Store for a while. It was an awfully programmed app, but it was up there. It was really cool. And these days, I am interested in cross-platform app development, mobile DevOps, and pushing the boundaries of combining web and mobile code.
My name's Samuel. I'm a systems engineer at Cloudflare. We are a serverless platform style company. We do many different things. And I work on kind of developer experience and developer tooling for the Cloudflare Workers platform.
So Samuel and I actually know each other from a little while back. We met at the University of Edinburgh, where we were both studying as students.
Yep. We first worked together at a renewable energy data visualization startup, mapping the flow of biofuels and renewable energies across the globe.
A little while later, we ended up working together at NASDAQ. We built a beta of NASDAQ's next generation trade surveillance software, which was a cool project.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about our latest project, which is an open source package to bring app development closer to the edge.
So what we're going to be looking at today, firstly, edge computing. What is it? We'll talk about how Cloudflare Workers falls into that. Client-server communications, how it's traditionally done as of 2015. Good front-end DevEx, what that looks like to us and what we would like to have, which leads us naturally to the solution that we came up with. And we'll actually demo it. This demo is going to be a little bit unconventional, so heads up. If you have the Expo Go app on your phone or the Expo app if you're on Android, hopefully it can be a little bit interactive and we'll have a bit of fun. And we'll finish off with some next steps, what we want to extend this into, what we want to expand for, and so on and so forth. So, Samuel, to start off with, what is edge computing?
Well, edge computing is basically a way to get around one single problem. And that's that the speed of light is really, really slow. So you may have heard some cold start times from earlier in the talk. But when you're thinking about user interaction, when you're thinking about the time you've actually got to respond to user action, you've got about 100 milliseconds before a user will notice something's happened. And if you're trying to hit any sort of real-time animation frame budget, you've got 16 milliseconds. So if you're talking about cold start times of 500 milliseconds, execution times of seconds, you're already dead in the water. So the speed of light is very slow. And if you try and consider network latency, you've got basically no time for compute. This is some average ping times for a server in London talking to some other major cities. Obviously, networks are not 100% efficient. This is some average across, some amount of time. But if you're talking to Sydney from London, that's 256 milliseconds in network ping time. That's not accounting for your compute time, which you need to add on top of that. So if you want to hit 100 milliseconds of user interaction, you want to hit any sort of animation frame budget, you've got no luck. So what the edge is about bringing your compute close to your users. So this is Cloudflare's edge network, but there are other, edge providers. And basically, it's about running your code as close to your users as you can, so that you kind of take the network latency part of your, time budget out of it, and you can spend more time on compute, more time on things that are actually useful for your users. So Cloudflare Workers is Cloudflare's edge platform. There are others. I work at Cloudflare. I'm obviously slightly biased. We're special because we have not just slow cold start times, we have 0 cold start times, which we do by racing the cold start with the TLS handshake. And because we have such an optimized platform, that ends up being essentially 0 from the code perspective. Yeah, so Cloudflare Workers, we take your code, we deploy it on hundreds of different locations around the world, and we run it at the location that's closest to your end users. The way they work, fairly simple. You take in a request and you give out a response. They try and mirror browser APIs as much as possible. We're pretty close to the web API. We're trying to get closer. WinterCG is the standards body that's working on this, trying to unify things across Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare Workers, and in fact Node, which is getting closer to the web platform as well, with things like Fetch from Indici. So this is a very simple Cloudflare Worker, just hello world, as it were. You can also write more complex ones. This uses D1, which is our SQLite database at the edge. It's in alpha right now. Definitely don't use it for production data. It has some problems that are being worked on. But it's still pretty cool that you can have a database at the edge. Built an SQLite running in WASM on our kind of edge network. And yeah, so Mo, tell me how traditionally clients and servers talk to each other.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're all familiar with this. This is actually us making a fetch request to a Lambda from the front end side. You would send a fetch request to a specific URL, and you define a method, maybe pass in some headers, any information that's needed by the server, you'd pass that through the body, and then you'd wait asynchronously for the response from the server, handle whatever you need to do with it. Maybe you'll have some success cases, some error cases. This is happening a lot, obviously, when you have a front-end app communicating with a back-end, and there's a lot of boilerplate. There's several lines to handle the most basic fetch requests that you'll have, and it should really be simplified. And you can see there is quite a lot of boilerplate. What we see is that meta frameworks, so that's sort of a layer of abstraction on top of modern front-end frameworks, are trying to deal with this in a slightly different way. So Next.js is probably the most popular example of a meta framework for. What you'll see is that it actually combines the front end and the back end code in a single file. Samuel is a big opponent of this, and he hates the ambient typing, so you can talk to him if you're interested in that. But what you'll see is that at the very bottom, there's get server-side props, and what that basically lets you do is execute server-side code in one file. So you would, like, let's say, get the posts from the database, and then you can just pass that through to your front-end JSX, which would be rendered, and you basically don't have to deal with all of that fetching boilerplate. It's kind of done magically for you by the meta framework, reduces the boilerplate, and generally gives you a little bit of a better DevEx.
Now, this is not just a React thing. SvelteKit is another non-React front-end framework that has a fairly similar good solution to this. You load some data on the server side in a different file this time, and you pass it down as props to your client-side code. But when you look at general solutions for non-framework specific things,
they still have a lot of boilerplate. So one of the most popular toys on the market right now, if you want to like get some cool general client-server communications, is tRPC. The nice thing about tRPC is that if you have a monorepo and it's all in TypeScript, the types will be shared between your front end and back end automatically. It's actually a very nice DevEx. So what you'll see is on the left-hand side, you've got the server. It defines a router that's got a bunch of functions, and it will return some values to the front end. And on the front end, as the values on the left change, you'll see that the types automatically get updated on the client side. That's really cool from a front-end dev perspective. It means that you have type safety across the network boundary, which is awesome. But yet again, there's a fair bit of boilerplate to basically just have a function that says, hello, X person. You have 20-ish lines, and not the most clean and simple solution that you can have. So what this kind of led us was, okay, this is pretty cool. It gives us another level of DevEx, but what do we want when we're looking for a good front-end DevEx experience? And I think we landed on three main themes. Firstly,
we want type safety across the network boundary. That is really key. That's something the tRPC gives us. That's something that these meta frameworks gives us. It gives you a lot more confidence that your types in the back end are matching your types in the front end. Because if your front end types are derived from your back end types, you change the back end, you'll also throw errors in the front end. Rather than kind of making type assertions on both the back end and front end, they can get out of sync.
I think the second one that we wanted was to make it really easy to do the simple functionality. So the co-founder of Stack Overflow calls this falling into the pit of success. He says that C++, as an example, is a language that encourages you or has these paradigms that push you into the pit of failure. And what language developers should try to do is try to encourage people to fall into the pit of success. What that means is you make things that are the basic simple use cases very simple to execute. It's very easy to stay within those guardrails. If you do want to sway away from things that are the standard or things that are a little bit more unconventional, you can do that, but it's not going to be easy for you to do it. So it encourages you to do the simple cases really easily.
And so what that means for us is you don't have a huge amount of boilerplate for a simple case. You can add that on if you want complex use cases. But if it's a simple case, it's really easy. It's kind of not much code. And then finally, interoperability. We want to be as close to the platform as possible. We don't want to build, abstractions on top of abstractions that make it really hard to understand what's going on. We want you to be able to go to the MDM web docs. We want you to be able to go to the Cloudflare docs and be able to translate those concepts directly into your code.
Which then leads us to the solution that we came up keep in mind, this is quite fresh. It involved a weekend hackathon-like coding run with me and Samuel. Very, very fun time.
This is very fresh.
This is incredibly fresh. And we came up with worker functions. So, what are worker functions?
Well, the name is still workshopping. If you have a better name, please tell us. This is the best we could come up with at short notice. But yeah, it's full stack type safety with Cloudflare Workers. So it's an opinionated SDK to get up and running. It's fully type safe. You're just writing simple functions, and there's basically no boilerplate. Yeah, so we're going to show you some code now.
Cool. So let's handle that same basic use case. What we want to do is have some sort of function on the back end that can say some sort of greeting back to the user, and we want to just execute that on the front end. That's it. On the right-hand side, we have our server-side code. We've created a tweet.worker.ts file. And within that, there's a simple async function that's being exported called sayHello that takes in an argument, which is a name of type string. And it returns the values. It's a very simple JavaScript, or TypeScript in this case, function. On the left-hand side,
on the left-hand side, you have your client. You import worker client from worker functions. You instantiate it with where you're hosting this, whether it's localhost, on the network. And you just call the function. That's fully type safe. You can use multiple parameters. We've used one here, but you can have multiple. The way we do this is we have a generation step and we stick some code in your node modules folder, but you don't need to worry about that. But yeah, very, very simple.
All just kind of works out of the box, very simple to use. So this is a very simple example. Let's do something a little bit more unconventional and do a demo. So raise of hands, has anyone downloaded ExpoGo? Okay, this should be a little fun. All right. Nice. Okay. So we did a little bit of introspection and thought we need something to show, well, we wanted to have a little bit of a fun demo. And we went back to our roots, so our university days, and I was looking through some hackathon projects that I did, and I landed on a website that had a little bit of a political twist, so I'm being a little bit risky going here, but the website would show you a tweet from a certain individual, and you would have to guess whether or not it was an actual tweet or it was a fake tweet. And that website was called Trump or Not. It's a little bit irrelevant now, hopefully stays that way, but we've kind of ported it over to a mobile app. And it's very simple. It's really not complicated. All it does is it brings up a tweet. You have to guess whether or not it's Trump. So raise your hand if you think it's Trump. Can you say it out loud? I really don't want to. This was part of the risk with this, so we didn't think it would. Take a guess. 3, 2, 1, Trump. All right, not Trump. And then you click the button and you have, oh, you guessed correctly. Trump wouldn't say that. Great. And you then refresh the tweet and go, and there's a little counter at the bottom. So, live demos are all fun and whatnot. Let's look at the code together and see what's actually happening.
So we have some code. This is our server-side code. I apologize if the mouse goes everywhere. This is running. So this is the app running in the iOS simulator, and this is our code here. So all we have in this file is some functions that we're exporting. So get random tweet is the first one. This is what you call to get the random tweet. The way we've interacted with the Cloudflare developer environment to try and get reference to the Cloudflare database and get reference to any sort of things that Cloudflare exposes is to bind to the this on your function. TypeScript doesn't type that very nicely, and we're working on ways to kind of make this. But yeah, so you can get this.db. We've just made a simple database client, select a random tweet, and then return the tweet. And if you hover over this, you can see the type is promise tweet, as Yes, absolutely. That good? Amazing. Okay, so if you hover over the type, you can see the type is promise tweet. Now, if we go over to our front-end code, let Mo take this.
So on the front-end side here, you can see that we've actually imported worker client from our node modules. And I've just instantiated it here to point to a deployed published Cloudflare worker, but you could also point this to localhost. And then what we have is wherever we want to call, first of all, if you look here, you'll see that it's got worker type fns. We'll look at what that is in a second. But let's go into refresh tweet. So you can see here, we actually make a call to await worker.getRandomTweet. if you hover over get random tweet, you can see it also has the type that returns promise tweet. So this is all in sync with the backend. Now, if I actually went back to my worker here and I accidentally changed this to an empty object, which doesn't exist anymore, you can see already we've got some type errors coming up. And what this does is if you go back to this side, it's expecting, okay, well, it's saying the promise is being returned, which is an empty object. But if you scroll down, you'll see that wherever we were making reference to the values inside the object that was previously there, we're getting linting errors or type errors, and it's telling us actually something's changed on the server side. You probably want to have a look at this. So let's go ahead and fix that bug that we just introduced. And that's all gone. Everything's back to normal. These are being typed correctly, and we know what we're expecting.
So one last thing that we think is pretty cool, and then we're going to do some live coding, which is always a risk, is that you can click to definition on these. So if you command click, you get to your server-side function, which we think is pretty cool, all through the magic of TypeScript inference. But what we're going to do now is we're going to add an extra feature to this app where you can say, I don't know if this is Trump or not, I'm feeling lucky. And you can just randomly guess. So on the server side, this is as simple as this function, which we've conveniently pre-written. I'm going to uncomment. So random vote, you take a tweet ID, and you decide whether or not it's positive, and you bind this environment to the vote. We realize this is a bit unergonomic. We're working on ways to fix this. And you just call the vote function. So what's pretty cool about this is that you don't need to do kind of some RPC magic to call functions within the same worker. You can just call them as functions, because they are just functions. That's what we mean by not building abstractions on top of abstractions. You can just call the functions because they are functions. Yeah, so if you go back to the front end, and I uncomment this code here, vote random. Now this is definitely a lot of boilerplate. This is React boilerplate, though. We won't take any blame for this. This lets you do a random vote. And if we scroll back down to the button, we can just add a button. And it should appear in the app, but I'm just realizing that
It's already there. Don't worry.
Okay.
We Expo didn't refresh there, so.
Okay, so if I save this and I save my server-side code, then the app should refresh. And you can now start saying, feeling lucky, and you will get a random.
Well, that's because you haven't pointed it to our local host.
Right.
So let's start up our Wrangler.
That's true. Okay.
Live demos, they said.
Live
That's
demos.
a good idea.
Yeah, great idea. Okay. So this is using Wrangler, the Cloudflare Workers CLI development tool, which doesn't work great with zoomed in screen sizes.
Let's zoom it out.
Yeah.
There we go.
Live demos are always good. Right, I'm going to restart that.
Cool.
Okay, so that's going to tell me an IP 2.2. Will attempt to copy. I'll zoom in a bit more. Cool, and then if I just point this at my locally running server.
So you can see at the very top, we had the worker client that we were initializing. That's pointing to a published one. We haven't updated that yet. We've been developing locally. So what we're just going to do is we're going to change what URL that's pointing to.
Now, obviously, in a real app, you would use an environment variable or whatever, but this is just for demo purposes. We've got string literal. And yeah, so now you can press I'm feeling lucky, and you can start voting.
And it can fail.
And it can fail. Let's try again. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Observability would really help with that. But yeah, you can see it working. And you get a new tweet, and you can keep going.
Cool. So
Now,
it's as if this demo hasn't been going wildly enough. For those of you who have Expo, we're going to give you a QR code to get the previously deployed version of the app.
So if you could try and scan this with Expo.
You might get a little prompt that comes up. You should have signed in if you haven't. So if you haven't made an Expo account, just go ahead and make it. It should take about 30 seconds. But then you should be able to actually scan this, and you'll get a little prompt at the bottom that says, oh, it's for your first time trying an app. Just close that down, and you should have access to it.
So hopefully you're all looking at the deployed app and not a huge error screen. Anyone see an app?
Awesome.
Amazing.
We've got one. Amazing. Okay, cool. So what you guys are missing here, I think, is our latest changes, but we're going to go do something about that.
Yeah. We want you to be able to use the things that we've just written. Like, it would be kind of a bit boring otherwise.
Well, yeah. So let's go back and change the worker client here.
So while Mo's doing some stuff, I'm going to be talking to you about errors. Errors are important, and on the server side, if you have errors, you want to be able to catch them on the client side. Now, we thought a bit about this, and we thought about what would be a nice ergonomic UI for, API for errors if you had errors on the server side. Do you want to like return an error object from your function? And we thought, why don't we just make errors work? So if you throw an error on the server side, we will catch that for you, we'll serialize it, we'll send it over the network, and then we'll catch it in the client, and we will rethrow it as if it's just an error. Now, it only works for errors right now. We're working for like, other subclasses of error, but it works for errors, which is pretty good for a simple demo. And yeah, you can see if this function takes in a city, tells you what country it's in, and it'll throw an error, and it knows where London is, it doesn't know where Manchester is, and it'll throw an error telling you that. And yeah, so hopefully that filling for time has worked.
There we go. All right, so we're going to refresh this. And if you could scan the new QR code.
If you quit Expo, that should.
Nice.
Is it working?
Has everyone got the new version of the app with 3 buttons?
Yeah. Amazing.
Awesome. So we've built this in a live demo that admittedly could have gone a little bit better. And we pushed the changes within the 30 seconds that Samuel was stalling. And you should have a newly deployed function on the edge, so on a serverless edge function, along with new front-end functionality, all with the power of worker functions. Cool. So you can have hours of fun with Trump or not, or minutes. And then, yeah. So just to go over some next steps.
Yeah, so what are we going to do with this next? This is obviously a very fresh project. We're very excited about it. We think it can go places. But one thing we really want to look at is real-time functionality with WebSockets. So you might notice a small counter at the bottom of the screen there that says total votes. Right now, we're just polling for that. But it'd be really cool if the server could send the client, updates when there was a new vote. And so we want to see if we can get this kind of good ergonomic developer experience with WebSockets.
Secondly, if you're already a front-end developer, you have some experience, you'll know that there's a lot of front-end querying solutions that aim to reduce some of the boilerplate. So one of the most famous one is TAN-stack query. And this isn't just a wraparound fetch. What these solutions oftentimes do is they'll let you do things like retries. They'll let you do things like caching. And so we don't want to rebuild all of that functionality inside of this SDK. What we're going to do is we've already looked at integrating existing front-end querying solutions so that you can use TAN-stack query if you already have it in your code base, and you can start adding it to code bases that already exist, and maybe you just want to add a few worker functions here and there.
Yeah, and then finally, we want to work on a cleaner API for integrating with platform native features. So binding to this environment works. It's a bit ugly when you have to, call functions again. You have to rebind to this, and it's a bit unintuitive. There are some things coming to the Cloudflare platform fairly soon that will make this easier. So we should have some better solutions for that in the near future.
And I guess lastly, we would love for you to try it and then give us feedback. This is all on GitHub. We'll obviously ask if Matt and folks can put out the link afterwards, but we just love for people to try it. Cloudflare Workers are really fun to develop on, and I think this should hopefully make it a little bit more approachable as well for newcomers. And we want everyone to be involved. We want people to put in pull requests. We want issues to be filed, and hopefully we can improve it over time. And yeah, it's been a really fun project. Thank you all for listening.
Well.